Well, hello, all you beautiful people. Welcome to The Unseen. We are going to start a new series, kind of, if you want to call it a series. We're going to go through the book of Daniel. We're not going to go through every detail, like verse by verse or anything, but we're going to kind of go through the book of Daniel and really highlight some of the things that I believe connects directly with the unseen, which is all about just being aware of the spirit realm, the unseen, and kind of just embracing that. So let's get into it. All right, so I want to just kind of remind everyone watching about what this is all about with these videos. We've talked about a number of different things, and we're going to keep talking about lots of different stuff and dive deeper into some things over time. But really the point of what we're doing is, to sum it up, is just about embracing the mystery. That there is so much that God has created, the way He's designed things, the way He's set things up and in order. And there's a lot in the spirit realm that unless we intentionally pay attention to, we're just ignorant of a lot of stuff, and we don't have opportunity to grow in them and mature. So it's about embracing the mystery and just diving in deep and like, what can we discover? What can we learn about? What can we grow in? So just wanted to relay that foundation for the unseen. That's what we're doing. And I believe we as Christians can be the most experienced and knowledgeable and well-versed in all areas of the mystical, of the unseen, the spirit realm, all that stuff, and just what God has created and given us access to. So, all right, so we're going to talk through the book of Daniel. So now we're going to start in Daniel chapter 1. And just to give you like a setup of Daniel 1, it's kind of just sets up the main characters of the book, which is Daniel. And then there's Radshak, Meshach, and Abednego. And those are their new names. And Daniel's new name is Belteshazzar. I don't know if I pronounced this right, but Belteshazzar. They got renamed in Babylon outside of their Israelite names, their Hebrew names. So it sets up these characters and how they have been brought to the king in Babylon, and now they're a part of this group of people being trained to basically wait on and serve the king and be a part of, I guess you could say, the council of the Babylonian Empire. And so they're in this like training mode, and this is what's being set up. So the main thing we're going to talk about in Daniel 1 is fasting. Now there will be more talk about this, because it happens in more than one spot in this book, and it's worth bringing up more than once. But just as an intro to the subject of fasting, and maybe we'll be on this for a little while, is these people being trained are given this diet. So it's kind of like to help make them ready. They're given what it says, the king's meat or the king's food, and his wine, and so like they're getting like the best of the best, basically. And Daniel's position, and then the other three, I'll just refer to them as the other three, or the four of them as a whole, because I don't feel like going through all the names over and over again. That's just a lot. But Daniel with the other ones, they kind of get like this thing where these are Israelites, and they have a law where God has set up like what they can eat, what they can drink, and wine wouldn't have been wrong for them to drink, but they were determined not to defile themselves. So that's actually what it says, that Daniel was determined that he would not defile himself with the king's meat and wine and all that. Excuse me. So they set this whole thing up. The guy in charge, who like really loves them, but is worried about getting in trouble for letting them not eat this food, because the point is that it's supposed to make them like ready, and it's probably has to do even with how well they're fed, so that the people that are like serving in these high places with where the king is and all his, high level people, that they're not looking like haggard and, like messed up or like not well fed. So that's probably a part of it. And so he's worried that he's going to get in trouble because the people he's supposed to prepare are not where they should be, even physically speaking. So he's worried about it. And Daniel says, just test us, give it 10 days, and let's see, give us only vegetables and water. So this is kind of like an unofficial like fast, where it doesn't actually use the word fasting, but you could look at it like that. Now I want to make some points because I actually want to like bring some, what I hope will be clarity in the area of fasting. Because we have a culture and, the different fads that pop up where we use the word fasting closely connected with just diet plans, people trying to lose weight, different methods of maybe detoxing or just all that kind of stuff. So what I want to point at is that what Daniel was doing with the whole vegetables and water thing, he was not trying to set up a comparison between the different diets. Because here's the point. Israelites, they ate well. They had rules, but they ate well. It wasn't like they literally, as a nation, they just ate vegetables and water and drank water. That's not what they did. So this was not a commentary on what they were allowed to eat as Jews, basically. This was just a comparison. And so here's why. This is what I want to get to. This was not just a comparison of diets. This was a fast where Daniel and the other three were basically saying, like, prove that because their desire was to not defile themselves. So ultimately, another way of saying it would be their desire was to honor the Lord and the rules and the laws that he set up and not cross that line. So they had this like determination to stay pure, essentially, to stay clean. And so what I believe happened is God honored that, and that's what we're going to get into. So this wasn't about diet. Fasting is ultimately not about your diet or dieting. Fasting is not about losing weight. Fasting is not about detoxing your body. Fasting is about none of those things, though yes, sometimes there can be those side benefits. That's okay, but I want to make it very clear that we do not fast from a spiritual standpoint for any of those reasons. Okay, so it was not a diet plan. Daniel's heart was to not defile himself with probably the types of food being served, because this wasn't the Israelites. This was the Babylonian Empire. All the other nations didn't have these rules of what was clean and unclean for them to eat. So, okay. So true fasting is 100% spiritual in nature. True fasting is 100% spiritual in nature. And you might be wondering, we're talking about fasting, and this is all like, these videos are all about the unseen and the spirit realm. We'll get to that, so just bear with me. It's 100% spiritual in nature, and scripturally has only to do with food. So another line I want to draw is, while it's not wrong to do this, fasting has nothing to do with not watching shows or football or something like that. It has nothing to do with, so I like to read. So the idea would be like, I'm not going to read other books. I'm just going to read the Bible or something. That is not fasting. I'm not fasting books. Fasting is about food and drink, okay? So all those other things can be good, because some of you might be thinking, well, I've done that and it's been really powerful or it's been good. That's awesome, because I believe God honors that you have set up a discipline to draw near to him. So that is a good thing, but just for the sake of what the Bible actually shows us with certain things, fasting itself is about food and drink. So all those other things are disciplines, but fasting is different. And here's why. So it has to do with food. And what this is, what fasting really is it's not about starving yourself. It's not about, the point the point in fasting is not to deny yourself of things, except that you are withholding feeding your body something to then turn to the Lord. So it's not even real fasting unless you are intentionally turning to the Lord, because he is our sustenance. And we're not going to go to all the scriptures, but Jesus reveals himself as the living bread. He's eternal life. He's the living bread. The Holy Spirit that he gives us is the river of living water, the living water that he gives us to drink. So right there, and there's other things like wine, that's a part of it too. Milk. Anyway, we're not going to go into all that. But maybe we will in the future, but right now we're not. Rabbit trail. He's the living bread and the living water. So we have bread and water, and then you have the whole piece with Jesus when he was fasting and the devil tried to tempt him in the wilderness, and his response was, "Man shall not live on bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God." So the very correlation to that is to say that we're not just about what we feed ourselves physically. That's not the important thing, but that we are literally fed by the words of the Lord, by his presence, by who he is. He is the living bread. He feeds us daily. And that also connects to the manna in the wilderness with the Israelites and all that. As a shadow and type, or however you say that, type and shadow of the Lord being our daily sustenance. So fasting is actually about withholding from feeding yourself physically for a time, for a set period of time, to then turn to him that he would be our sustenance. So how does that work? Because that sounds crazy, right? Now, I don't know about you, but when I was growing up with fasting, that was not part of my understanding, so I didn't get it until I really started diving into this. So how does that work? Because you can't live forever without food, right? The answer is yes. But here, we're not going to go into the depths of this. Maybe soon we will, because this would become a very, very long video if I did. But one really powerful example is Moses, where if you're familiar with the story, he had to go up Mount Sinai. The Lord basically called him up. He went up there. He was up there for 40 days and 40 nights, and he had to do that twice. I don't know if you know that. He had to do that twice. Because when he came down and they were worshiping the golden calf, and all the stuff they were doing, he broke it, right? So then it actually had to happen again. So later in the book of Exodus, it happens again. But it might have happened twice, this next piece. But we know it happened once for sure, because the first time it doesn't say he did this, second time it does. So the second time he goes up the mountain, and it says, again, he was up there with God for 40 days and 40 nights. That is more than a month, if that's not clear. 40 days and 40 nights. And the second time it happened, the Bible says, I'm assuming I have this right, Exodus 34, verse 28, it says that Moses, during those 40 days and nights, had no food or drink. So we know that is physically impossible. You would not survive for 40 days without food or water. How is it possible? It's possible because he was quite literally in the very presence of God, and God's glory itself was sustaining his body. And the result of that was when he came down, that was where we see his face was shining, and he had to cover it with a veil to talk to the people because he was so bright. So Moses fasted for 40 days and 40 nights and was completely sustained by the presence of God. He might have done that twice, but the first 40 days, the first time he did it, it doesn't say he fasted, so we don't know. But maybe twice, but definitely one time. And then Jesus did the same thing in the wilderness. It doesn't say he didn't have water, so maybe he had access to water, not sure, but it definitely says he had no food for 40 days. So Jesus did almost the same thing that Moses did, if not the same thing. So anyway, the point is this, that like his words, his presence, his glory itself sustains us. And it's only by faith that this works. If you fast and it's just from a place of just doing something or even a dieting sense, it will not work this way. It is only from a continual turning to him that it's his presence that sustains you. And you will notice a difference. You will notice a difference. When you fast and you are relying on him and turning to him and leaning into him, you will notice a difference when your faith is connected and your belief is connected to him being your bread, being your water. Okay. So, the result is this, and here's why I want to connect this to the unseen, because Daniel, the book of Daniel, is full of the spirit realm activity, and we're going to get into that in the following weeks. But this is what sets it up, is the result of what Daniel did. And so after these 10 days, let me get back to that. After these 10 days, it says that Daniel and the other three looked more not nutritious. They looked more, I'm losing the word. They looked better. Their countenance was better. They looked more well fed than everyone else. But I want to point out that this is completely supernatural, because you don't eat veggies and drink water for 10 days and look healthier. Your body's going through a lot of stuff. And you might be, I'm not saying you won't be healthy, but if you've ever fasted and done something like that, you don't look better, at first at least. And so after those 10 days, it says they actually looked better, and they changed everything because of this. And then they didn't have to defile themselves. But then beyond that, the supernatural, what God did through there, is it says, I got it here. I didn't want to misquote it. In Daniel 1:17, all four of them, it says, God gave them knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom. And Daniel, specifically Daniel, had understanding in all visions and dreams. So as a result of their choice here, they actually were elevated. They had like a greater increase of revelation and their ability to connect with what is, you could say, is the mystery of things. That they just were suddenly, they had this impartation of greater knowledge and skill and understanding. Even to the point for Daniel being able to have understanding in visions and dreams, which we'll get into that more later in the book. Someone, Ian Carroll, we call this an Ianism. He says this, it's called the Daniel ratio. And that's later, just a few verses down, where the king found these four 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers in his realm. So he found them 10 times better. So this is the Daniel ratio, that we as Christians have access to lean fully in to the creator of the universe, that in all things, visions, dreams, wisdom, understanding, even whatever they were dealing with the magicians and astrologers, that what we are connected to with the Lord is we have the opportunity, it's not a given, we have the opportunity to be even considered 10 times better than all the rest of the wise men, those that are well learned and can operate in all these different areas. So fasting is completely supernatural, and it is a powerful access point to diving deeper into immersing yourself in the river of revelation, where your eyes will be opened to things that they weren't before. You will have greater understanding and wisdom. And ultimately, that's not the point of it. The point in fasting is to draw near to him. And when you draw near to him, the things of the spirit, the unseen, the mystical, all of it begins to unveil itself, because you're drawing near to the one that all of it comes from, which is the main point of it all. So fasting is powerful. It's supernatural. We will talk more about this. So if you have any questions, let me know, and I can maybe hit on those in the upcoming videos if you have any specific questions about fasting and all that. So anyway, thank you for joining me. Have a good one.